Granny Charlotte here, and we are getting pretty close to the end of Little Pilgrim's journey. Today we have a couple of vocabulary words, so let's do those. Our first word is arbor. Arbor is a shady area where vines and trees create a wall and a roof. Sometimes it grows naturally, or the trees and plants are planted by people. Arbor. The second word is delight. Means to make happy, extra pleased. Kind of like on Christmas morning, children are delighted. Delight. All right, let's get reading. The little pilgrims, having passed over the enchanted ground, found themselves in the land of delight. It was the most beautiful country they had ever seen. Its mountains were covered with trees, and its valleys were green with soft grass and bright with the loveliest of flowers. In the distance shone the glorious light that the shepherds had shown them from the delectable mountains, and as the children's eyes grew accustomed to its brightness, they were able to distinguish the walls and gates of the celestial city. Here's a picture of beautiful mountains and the flowers, and off in the distance is the shining light from probably the celestial city. The wicked prince and his soldiers never came into the land of delight. The people who lived there were all true servants of the king, and they received Christian and Hopeful gladly and heartily, and were very kind. "Your troubles are over now," they said. "You have only to stay here and be happy until the king sends for you." "Will he send for us soon?" asked Christian. "We cannot tell you that," replied the people. "Sometimes the pilgrims live quietly in this land for many years, and sometimes the king gives them work to do for him in the country of the wicked prince. But at last they all go to the celestial city to dwell forever in his presence." "I remember," said Christian, "when Help drew me out of the slough, and he said that he had been to the gates of the city, but the king had given him some more work that he would have to do before he entered it. And while he wandered up and down the mountains and along the beautiful valleys with Hopeful, little Christian began to wonder whether his mother was living in this land of delight or whether she'd gone into the city. He looked anxiously at the people whom he met, but he did not see anyone whose face was like that of his mother's picture. "The king must have sent for her," he said. "Oh, will it not be nice to see her again? Perhaps she has heard that we are here, and she may be watching for us even now." The little pilgrims spent many happy days in the land of delight, and one morning they came to a valley that was laid out in vineyards and large gardens. The gates were all open wide, and as the boys stopped to look at the trees and the flowers, one of the gardeners spoke to them. "You need not stay outside," he said. "These are the king's gardens, and they are for the pilgrims to walk in." Then he took their hands and led them about the vines and the flowers, and in the evening he showed them a quiet little arbor where they might lie down and sleep safely. And here's a little picture of an arbor. It looks kind of comfy, doesn't it? Cool and shady. "Oh," said Christian, as they sat watching the sun, which was slowly sinking behind the hills. "Don't you feel glad that we came? I seem to be forgetting all the troubles we have had now that we are so happy." "I am thankful that I ran away from Vanity Fair," said Hopeful. "And it was such a good thing that I did not lose my roll there. I don't know how it was that I managed to keep it safely." "And now we have only to wait for the king's message," replied Christian. "I would go away and work if you wished it, but I think I would like best to go straight into the city." "So would I," said Hopeful. And then they lay down side by side as they had done in the Valley of Peace and slept quietly until the morning. of Delight was so very near to the celestial city that the Shining Ones often came down to visit the people who lived there. Their faces shone with a beautiful light, as the face of Christian's mother had done when he saw her in his dreams, and their garments were all white and glistening. Very often they brought messages from the king to his servants, and the little pilgrims knew that someday a message would be given to them. I told you that they slept one night in the king's garden, and the next morning when they were walking slowly among the vines, they saw two of the Shining Ones coming down the path to meet them. "You are traveling to the celestial city?" they asked. "Yes," replied the children. Then the Shining Ones asked many questions and desired both Christian and Hopeful to tell them of all that had happened since they began their pilgrimage. Christian told of all his difficulties and dangers, and Hopeful told how he had wasted his time in Vanity Fair. "We have often behaved badly," they said, "but we are really sorry, and we do love the king with all our hearts." "He knows that you do," replied the Shining Ones, "and he has forgiven you for all your mistakes and disobedience for the sake of his dear son. He has sent us now to tell you that he wishes you to enter into his city." When Hopeful heard this, his heart was full of joy. Little Christian was glad also, but when he thought of going into the presence of the king, he began to feel timid, and he said to the Shining Ones, "Will you go with us?" "We will go a little way with you," they said, "and we will meet you again at the gate of the city." "Oh," cried Christian, "how are we to cross over?" "You will have to walk through the water," replied the Shining Ones, "but you must not be afraid. The city is on the other side, and you will be very soon very safe within its gates." Hopeful raised his head and looked across the river, and on the opposite shore he could see the pathway winding up the hillside toward the glorious gates. "Oh, Christian," he said, "we need not be frightened now. We are so very near to the city." But little Christian's eyes had grown dim with fear, and he could not see the light beyond the river. He shivered as he looked at the water, and then he turned once more to the Shining Ones. "It is deep," he said. "We shall drown if we try to cross it." "No," replied the Shining Ones, "you will not find it too deep. You must not look at the water. You must lift your eyes up to the light, and the king will help you." "Will you come with us?" asked Christian again, and Hopeful wondered why he looked so pale and frightened. "We cannot come with you," replied the Shining Ones, "but we shall meet you on the other side and lead you into the presence of the king." "Did my mother cross it safely?" "Yes, and she is waiting for you and longing to see you. Do not be afraid. Trust in the king and remember all that he has done for you." Then the Shining Ones turned away, and Hopeful put his arm around his little companion's shoulders. "Come, Christian," he said, "this is our very last trouble, and it will soon be over. Let us go together, and I am sure the king will take care of us." So the little pilgrims went slowly down the bank and stepped into the water. And here's a picture of the dark river. I'm not so sure I'd be very brave to get into that water either. Well, that concludes our reading for tonight. Children, think about this all. Wash your hands, brush your teeth, and tonight I'm going to eat a lemon ice chip because it matches my shirt.